No contest, this book is the grossest book I have ever read. Hands down, that was the scariest book I have ever read. And reading this at night was completely impossible and a horrible idea. You might think I'm ridiculous, but at 80%, I DNF'd this book because it has one of my most hated tropes and I just couldn't take it anymore. Did I really just match my shirt to my Kindle? I most certainly did. Hello and welcome to my little corner of BookTube. I'm Jack and today we're talking about horror book recommendations. Lately, I've been in the mood for something dark, so I grabbed my Kindle and perused the Kindle Unlimited selection to find 3 horror books to read and review. I also found this super cool visual for the different subgenres of horror. And so I'm gonna use this when describing the books and the different horror tropes that they follow. This has different examples for movies, but I think it applies to books as well. First of all, a quick note about Kindle Unlimited. They cycle through the different books that they are currently offering. So while these 3 books I picked up because they were available on Kindle Unlimited, you'll want to check to make sure that they still are. For example, the first one that I'm going to cover was on Unlimited when I downloaded it, but at the time of filming, it's no longer on Unlimited. I think it's back to like $12.99. So sorry, I tried, but I still wanted to include it in this video for Kindle Unlimited horror. Let's get into that first book now. The first book that I read and I will be reviewing is Tender is the Flesh. This is a dystopian novel set in a time where a virus has affected animals and made them unfit for human consumption. To combat that, humans have resorted to cannibalism. There are 2 reasons why I have been avoiding picking up this book. Firstly, I knew I would be really upset to read a book about slaughterhouses and animal rights. I knew that would really disturb me and trigger me, so I didn't want to pick up this book for that reason. The other reason is I don't really enjoy government conspiracy stories, particularly around a virus. We've had enough feedback from uninformed people on their government conspiracies that have really thrown off the levels of misinformation. I wasn't interested in it. So those 2 reasons are why I haven't picked up this book yet. However, there are a couple other factors that finally convinced me to give it a try. The first reason is that the author is from Argentina, which just happens to be one of my favorite countries in the entire world. I also saw a lot of reviews on this book, and they said that the themes kind of revolve around classism, consumerism, capitalism, greed. These things made me feel like this book had a lot more substance and kind of intrigued me to give it a try. Finally, there were a lot of reviews that mentioned the emphasis on language in this book, which made me think that the marketing and the terms that this society chose to make everyone okay with cannibalism would be a really interesting factor. So I went into this paying attention to the language. Boy, was this book an experience. No contest, this book is the grossest book I have ever read. And damn, people will certainly go to some extremes to avoid being vegan. Can I interest you in a salad? Tender is the Flesh obviously falls into the cannibalism subgenre under gore and disturbing. The story centers around Marcos. Marcos works at the processing plant, and really all he has in his life right now is work because he is dealing with the loss of his child. He's left all alone to grieve since his wife is handling it in her own way, which was to leave and separate herself from him for a while. The grief over losing a child really reminded me of Pet Sematary, so I think if you liked the vibes in that one, then you might like Tender is the Flesh, if you were looking for a lot more gore in your life. The detached tone of Marcos makes the book really eerie, and the overall tone is very creepy. The process of slaughtering humans for meat consumption is just very factual, very regimented. He's talking about the rules and regulations around it. It's all just very simple to Marcos. until he almost starts to question the things around him. And it's really interesting how he highlights the different people and how they're adjusting to the new environment of cannibalism. Some people are all for it and they get super excited about the process. Others kind of follow along with everything because they want to impress others, they want to fit in. And finally, you have those in society that had mental breakdowns because they can just not deal with the new norm. Something I noticed in the book that I found extremely interesting was the level of hypocrisy throughout. It is perfectly legal for those owning a person for the source of meat to carve off pieces of their body to eat while they're still alive and keep them alive because the meat they carve off is more fresh. However, slavery is deemed inappropriate and illegal, and it also downgrades the value of the meat if someone enjoys it, or in other words, has sex with the person before they kill it to eat. It's really interesting where we draw the line here. I was right, there are definitely elements of the treatment of animals and what animals go through in the slaughterhouse experience, so that was very disturbing. However, in part 2, chapter 6, I really encourage you to skip this chapter because there is very blatant animal cruelty that I don't think adds anything to the story, and it was just really disturbing, really sad, really made me sick, kind of killed my enjoyment of the whole book because up to this point it had been very smart in highlighting animal cruelty and the treatment of animals. This was just too disturbing for me. I recommend you skip it. I was really hoping for a little bit more of a pandemic or virus story. I wanted to learn more about what made animal meat unfit for human consumption because I just wanted to hear more about that. What happened to the people that ate animals? I would love to know. But I think this is where the government conspiracy comes in because you find yourself questioning, were animals really unfit for people to eat? Or was this a way for the government to have population control? Because the first group of people to be eaten when cannibalism was legal were the poor and marginalized. Really makes you think. This was really an intelligent horror novel. It is something that you could kind of picture happening, especially the different elements and the different pressures that people faced, the influence of marketing and advertisement. You can really see how this could happen. This could be a realistic thing. As long as you are okay with the graphic nature of this book and you skip part 2, chapter 6, I recommend this book. Next up on the list for Kindle Unlimited horror is Stolen Tongues. For the plot, I want to read the synopsis from GoodReads because I think it's pretty awesome. A romantic cabin getaway doesn't go exactly as planned. Faye and Felix celebrate their new engagement. But soon, a chorus of ghastly noises erupts from the nearby woods. The screams of animals, the cries of children, and the mad babble of 100 mournful voices. A dark figure looms near the windows in the dead of night, whispering to Faye. As the weather turns deadly, Felix discovers that his terrified fiancée isn't just mumbling in her sleep, she's whispering back. GoodReads also says that this book was originally a contest-winning story on reddit.com's horror community No Sleep, and it's now being adapted into a feature film. So let's check out Stolen Tongues. Hands down, that was the scariest book I have ever read. And reading this at night was completely impossible and a horrible idea. As far as the horror subgenres, I feel like this kind of falls into the supernatural and giant monsters. There's a couple categories I think apply to this one, but I'm gonna go with those two. Faye is 26 and Felix is 28, and something that's really interesting is the main character's name is Felix, just like the author's name is Felix. Coincidence? All right, so our girl Faye, ever since she was a child, she has had an undiagnosed sleep condition. She sleepwalks, she sleep talks, she has night terrors. Normally they're just about like work or silly things, but once they go to this cabin for their getaway, these night terrors become a lot more sinister. Damn, the things Faye starts doing when she's sleeping are terrifying. If I was Felix, I don't know if I could stay with her. I might have to break up with her, but at the very least, I think I would have to buy my own house and sleep somewhere else. From page 1, not kidding, from the prologue, this is a high adrenaline, fast-paced, terrifying on every single page book. The fear is relentless, and it does not let up throughout the entirety of the book. I think I was the most petrified at chapter 12, so when you get to that one, be sure all the lights are on and your dog is on alert, because that was scary. I love that what was happening was really happening. There wasn't an element to the plot of, oh, you're imagining things, or oh, you might be crazy. It was really happening. I think that's something that I really need when it comes to horror. I don't like the unreliable narrator and that they might be imagining the scary things happening. While I really enjoyed the horror of this book, there were a couple things that I didn't enjoy as much. Firstly, the big reveal of why this stuff was happening was so dumb and it was so anticlimactic. I was really hoping for a much more intelligent twist to this. Also, you know how in horror movies where someone is making a really dumb decision and you're like yelling at your TV screen, don't go in there, don't open that door. I really felt that same way in this book. For example, we know Faye is having night terrors and she's doing creepy shit in her sleep. Why on earth would you invite someone with a newborn baby to be your house guest? Come on, you were just asking for trouble. And while it was really scary, it got a little bit repetitive because there's only so many nights you can follow along with Faye as she does creepy shit before you kind of get over it. Even though I feel like this was a very fast-paced book, the plot didn't really progress very much throughout the course of the book. It was mostly just a series of really creepy things, or like really creepy nights, that made up most of the book. Again, I think I was just missing a little bit of that intelligence factor that brings everything together. Why is she experiencing this? Why are things happening to them? That's kind of where I wanted more of the plot to go. I would not say that Stolen Tongues was very gory. They did talk about maybe the police finding a body and the state or the condition it was in when they found it, and that could be a little bit graphic, but this was really not a gory book, especially when you compare it to Tender as the Flesh. In short, I really enjoyed the journey of this book, not so much the destination. But since this officially tops my list as the scariest book I've ever read, I really think you should check it out if you like horror. The final horror book I picked up for Kindle Unlimited for these reviews was The Nightmare Room. I was really looking for a good old-fashioned haunted house story, and this one appealed to me because the main character is a narrator of audiobooks, and I heard that his recordings played a factor in the haunting. I thought that was a very cool element since I myself love audiobooks, so I decided to give this one a try. You might think I'm ridiculous, but at 80%, I DNF'd this book because it has one of my most hated tropes and I just couldn't take it anymore. I'll get to all that in a minute, but first I wanted to say that for the horror subgenre, this really fits into the haunted house and maybe a little bit of the possession subgenres. Peter is 35, Hannah is 30. They're husband and wife, and they are moving cross country to move into Peter's dad's old house. His father is getting older and has just moved into a retirement home, so they're moving into this place. They are moving into this house because they are looking for a change. They are grieving the loss of their son, which really reminded me of Tender as the Flesh. It seems like a common horror trope seems to be grieving a child. Although that's not the only part of this book that reminded me of Tender as the Flesh. I swear, this book is going to live rent-free in my head for the rest of my life. The Nightmare Room was a much slower pace, although there were some really creepy hauntings. And when Peter is doing his audiobook narrations, for example, when he plays it back, he has some different background noise of someone talking to him, and it sounds like his son is talking to him. We have alternating chapters. So we have a 7-year-old boy who is being haunted, and also he's being very seriously abused by his father. Then you have Peter, who is just moving into this house and experiencing much of the same things. Also not relevant to the plot at all, but I still found it interesting. The wife has similar characteristics to the wife in Stolen Tongues. If I'm warning you about animal abuse, then I should mention in chapter 7, there is an event that takes place with a crow that might be a little bit disturbing. It wasn't as bad to me as what I experienced in Tender as the Flesh, but it was still animal abuse, and this comes back up throughout the book. As far as how gory the book is, when I stopped it at the 80% mark, there was really no gore involved. Okay, now the reason why I officially DNF'd it, and 80% is pretty far in, right? I mean, I'm counting this book as read. I just didn't want to finish. It was like 40 minutes remaining. I was really close, guys. But something I can't stand in books are when our main character is keeping a secret. So Peter is experiencing a haunting, and he's not telling anybody, he's just lying about it. Maybe as a result of that, I don't really know, but everything is kind of making it out to be like he's imagining things, it's all in his head, he's crazy, and I really don't enjoy that. I don't know if it would have been resolved by him just sharing with Hannah what he was going through. I don't know if this was only affecting him or it just Hannah hadn't noticed it yet. I don't care. It was just a lot of examples of him acting out because of this haunting, and he is made out to be crazy because nobody knows what's going on. I just don't enjoy it, and life is too short to read books we're not enjoying. But that is really unique to me, so if it doesn't bother you, you should still check this one out because I know I love a good haunted house story. So there you have it. Those are the 3 horror books I read from Kindle Unlimited. Again, right before filming, I went to check on Kindle Unlimited and I did not see Tender as the Flesh on there anymore, so I'm really sorry about that, guys, but still worth reading. Tender as the Flesh will be a really good choice if you're in the mood for a horror book that is also really intelligent and kind of makes you think of the extremes that real people will go to given the right circumstances. Obviously, be forewarned, this is very graphic and very gory. Stolen Tongues is the scariest book I have ever read. I think if you like horror, you need to check this one out, but maybe don't read it at night unless you're just a fearless badass like that. Finally, The Nightmare Room could be a good choice if you are looking for a slower paced, intricate, haunted house story. Obviously, that's only if you are not also bothered by the nobody believes me, everyone thinks I'm crazy kind of an aspect of book. Well, I guess that's it. My memory card was full, so I guess I'm done talking to you about Kindle Unlimited horror recommendations, but thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.